Today we honor a remarkable man, a man who guided the Indians franchise
through the golden era of baseball here in Cleveland. Hall of Famer Lou Boudreau. And Lou did it all in this great game of baseball. He played, he managed, he was a player manager, and he was a broadcaster. But most of all, Lou Boudreau was a natural leader and a winner. After an All-American collegiate career at basketball and baseball, where he captained the University of Illinois to Big Ten titles in both sports, Lou joined the Indians. He played just one game in 1938 and 53 games in 1939. It was in 1940 when Lou Boudreau became the Tribe's regular shortstop and hit .295 and drove in 101 runs and led the American League shortstops in fielding percentage, something he would do 8 times in a 9-year career. A Hall of Fame career was then born. In just his 4th season in the major leagues, and after 2 straight selections to the American League All-Star team, Lou becomes the youngest manager in franchise history at the age of 24. Now, to put that in context, 3 other player managers in our franchise history and 3 of the greatest names in baseball history, Napoleon Lajoie was 30 when he took over, Tris Speaker was 31 when he was a player manager, and Frank Robinson, whom we honored earlier this season, was 39 when he became a player manager. Few players, and certainly fewer player managers, ever had a better season than Lou Boudreau had in 1948. Hall of Famer Bill McKechnie, a coach on that 1948 Indians team, said that season Lou was the greatest shortstop and the greatest leader that I have ever seen. As manager, Lou guided the American League champs to a 97-58 record, and as a player, hit .355 and knocked in 106 runs and had a career-high 18 home runs. And get this, struck out 9 times in 560 at-bats. The Indians and Red Sox finished the regular season tied. It necessitated the first ever one-game playoff in American League history. That game was played at Fenway Park. Lou, in the one-game playoff, went 4 for 4 with 2 home runs, and the Indians beat Boston 8-2 to win the American League pennant, and then would beat the Boston Braves in the World Series 4-2. Lou was then named the American League's most valuable player. With Boudreau at the helm as player manager from 1942 to 1950, his teams won 728 games, the most of any manager in Tribe history. Lou enjoyed a 15-year big league career, 13 of those right here with the Indians. He was a 7-time All-Star and remains in the top 10 all-time in 8 offensive categories. He was inducted into the Indians Hall of Fame in 1954. He was inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 1970, the same season his uniform number 5 was retired. It was the second number ever retired by the Cleveland Indians. Today, we remember and honor Hall of Famer Lou Boudreau. And we are so honored to have with us today more than 70 members of the Lou Boudreau family. They're all decked out here in red. You guys got it. Guys and gals, stand up. What a family reunion. We can't thank you enough for being a part of this. And it is just going to be a terrific day, and we're going to hear from a number of special people, including one of the men who made this happen, the Cleveland Indians owner, Paul Dolan.
Thanks, Tom. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us on yet another very special day celebrating the rich history of the Cleveland Indians. It is always a good day when we reach back into our history and come together to honor those who made it all happen. On behalf of the entire Cleveland Indians organization and our fan, we congratulate the Boudreau family on this wonderful recognition of Lou, as we further cement, or more appropriately, we bronze his rightful place in our franchise history. It is fitting that Lou's statue stands alongside two of his teammates, Bob Feller and Larry Doby. We celebrate that special time in Cleveland baseball history and acknowledge the key performers of that era, a time when the city and our nation was recovering from World War II and its aftermath, and including the social and economic upheaval that forever changed our communities. Their generation was known as the greatest. As such, these three men, Feller, Doby, and now Boudreau, represent all the greatest generation stood for, which is why we will be forever proud that these three men will stand at the entrance to this ballpark, representing both what we are as a community and a franchise and what we strive to be. In my own family history, Lou Boudreau looms larger than life. Growing up in a baseball-loving family, in a Cleveland Indians baseball-loving family, Lou Boudreau was our all-time favorite. Now, I'm not really sure that we had any choice in the matter because Lou Boudreau was my father's childhood idol. He never tired of telling us stories about how remarkable a player he was, what a great leader he was, and what a great competitor he was. While I actually wasn't there in 1948, in fact, I couldn't be there, I felt like I was there because my father constantly told us stories of that wonderful summer and October of 1948. Now, as a child of the 60s and 70s, winning in Cleveland was unknown, and the World Series was unthinkable. So my father's stories of this player-manager, Lou Boudreau, leading our Cleveland Indians to the World Series was to me like me reading stories of Harry Potter to my children. Magical and heroic, but unbelievable. Yet there is nothing fictional about the Boudreau magic. As the years passed, my dad would compare most Indians players to Lou Boudreau. Did he have the instinctive style of play that Lou had? Was he as smart as Lou? Few players lived up to that standard. There was a shortstop played here a while ago named Omar that we had a lot of fun talking about whether he was as good as Lou. You know, I routinely threw those numbers of gold gloves, and I heard back, well, they didn't start awarding gold gloves until the 57th season, 5 years after Lou played, but I sure heard how many gold gloves Lou would have won. Can you imagine the supreme confidence that Lou had when he took command of the Cleveland Indians in 1942 at the age of 24? There were many obvious challenges that come with being a manager at this young age, but consider also that his star player, the perennial all-star Bob Feller, had just enlisted in the U.S. Navy and would be gone until 1944, and that a few seasons later, an owner by the name of Bill Veeck comes along and integrates the American League. About that, Lou said, creed, race, or color are not factors in baseball success. Whether it be in the majors or minor league, ability and character are the only factors. Perhaps that is why Bill Veeck, with Lou Boudreau as his leader, was the first owner to integrate the American League. Lou Boudreau and Larry Doby now stand proudly side by side here outside Progressive Field, and we are extraordinarily proud of the two of them. The great Bob Feller had this to say about his teammate and manager. Lou had terrific instincts and was a great competitor. As a player-manager, he became so good that he went as far as calling pitches from his shortstop position. He was always thinking, always in the game. Cleveland sports writer Hal Lebowitz wrote the following during the 1948 season that summed up the essence of Lou Boudreau. It is the first game of a doubleheader versus the New York Yankees, who are chasing the Indians in the standings. Sounds a little familiar. Road Hal. Boudreau was taped up like a mummy, stepped to the plate as a pinch hitter, and delivered the game-tying single that led to the Indians winning the game and a doubleheader sweep, delivering a blow from which the Yankees did not recover. Hopefully, history will repeat itself again today. Now, Hal concluded those remarks with the following. When Hall of Fame performances were needed, Boudreau was there. He was a leader by example. We rejoice for him and with him. Hal's words nearly 60 years ago ring true today. For today we rejoice again as we honor one of the greatest players and one of the greatest managers in Cleveland Indians history, Lou Boudreau. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. The story is remarkable, how a 24-year-old became player manager in the major leagues. And how did owner Elva Bradley decide his 24-year-old shortstop was the man for the job? Well, just a real quick history lesson. In 1940, the Indians were a very good ball club. And despite some internal dissension among the ranks, so much so that the players went to the owner, Mr. Bradley, and asked that their manager, Oscar Vitt, be fired. Well, that team was then dubbed by the writers as the infamous Crybabies. Well, despite all the distractions, the Indians still just finished one game behind the Detroit Tigers for the American League pennant. Yet, Oscar Vitt was let go after that season. Vitt was replaced by the legendary Roger Peckinpah for the 1941 campaign. Peckinpah had managed the Indians from the late 1920s through the mid-1930s, and it was an attempt to try to calm things down. Well, there was no secret the ball club was seeking a skipper for the 1942 season. Enter a 24-year-old shortstop who was confident in his leadership abilities. Following the 1941 season, Lou Boudreau wrote a letter to Mr. Bradley asking that he be considered for the job as player manager. The story goes that the moment immediately after he mailed that letter, Lou wished that he could crawl into that mailbox and retrieve it. Well, thank goodness he did not. In today's world, considering that scenario, at the end of this season, we have a young shortstop who will turn 24. I don't know, Frankie, are you going to write a letter here to Paul and ask that you become the player manager of the Cleveland Indians? That's how young and how early in his career Lou Boudreau was, and obviously it paid off with that letter and the naming of Lou Boudreau as the Indians player manager. Our next speaker is the son-in-law of Lou Boudreau, married to Lou's daughter Sharon, a man who made his own mark on the game of baseball as the last, and we might very easily say it'll never happen again, a 30-game winner in Major League Baseball. He's a 3-time All-Star. He's a 2-time Cy Young Award winner. He was the American League's most valuable player with the 1968 Detroit Tigers with a record of 31-6 that year. Please welcome Denny McLain.
First of all, let me say this to you. I want to thank the Cleveland organization for putting this thing together. This has been unbelievable. I know it's been almost a miracle to put together. I just want to thank them and Bob for everything that they've done here. And to bring this day to fruition with all of the bodies that had to get here is literally a miracle. I'm one of the happiest and proudest men to consider myself a Boudreau in a sense. I am the luckiest man in the world because of Lou Boudreau blessed me with his daughter Sharon. 53 years ago, we were married. Lou had many great characteristics, but the most important I always admired with him, because I don't know very many people that do not have this, especially in this game. Lou had no ego, none. And after he was a manager at 24 years old, as we all know, he could have had an ego then. A major league shortstop in his early 20s, no ego. His 1948 Indians win in the World Series, and Lou was the MVP of the season in '48 with still no trace of ego. When anyone would ask him about his personal exploits, his superstar exploits, all Lou would say was, hey, we had a great team. We had the best second baseman, the best third baseman. We had Bob Feller. Those were the guys that won this thing for us. He entered the Hall of Fame, of course, in 1907. Again, if you would have had to hear his acceptance speech that lasted about 20 minutes that day, and all he talked about were his players. And he thanked baseball for all of the opportunities that baseball gave him. Lou is the only man I've ever met in my life who cared about everyone and everything. And he did as much as he could to make the game and life better for everyone. He later, after his playing days, had a great 30-year career of broadcasting, and lo and behold, 30 years with the Cubs. Yes, the Cubs. Well, easy now. By the way, I loved pitching against Cleveland when I played. So whenever someone would ask me if my father-in-law was a tough guy and kind of a horse's you-know-what, I would always respond. I said, you know what? If you look in the encyclopedia or the dictionary under father-in-law, I swear his picture should be in that either book. That's the kind of man he was. He was simply the best father-in-law anyone could ever have, and quite possibly the best man I ever met in my life. And I've told you about his integrity. Lou loved Cleveland. He loved this city, and told me numerous times, hundreds of times probably, if he had had his druthers, he would have wanted to broadcast the Cleveland Indian games for 30 years. Lastly, I want to say this. Despite all of his accomplishments, the Hall of Fame, the MVP, and the World Championship, he would never say or talk about his exploits. I can truly tell you that beyond his stardom, he was truly the greatest MVP of them all in life, maybe not on the field all the time, but for sure off the field. I and my wife Sharon want to thank the Cleveland Indians and everybody else who put this thing together, and all of you fans who I tell you, he loved Cleveland. He loved the fans here. He loved coming back when he was able to, and he will never forgot the city of Cleveland. We thank the Cleveland Indians once again for this great honor bestowed on one of the greatest people to ever walk this earth, Lou Boudreau, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Denny. And now our final speaker of the day. Please give a warm Cleveland welcome to a former Marine, Lou Boudreau, Jr.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon. And what a glorious afternoon it is it not? It's absolutely wonderful. My family's from Phoenix, so it's a little cool for us, but it's just stunning what the Cleveland Indians have done for this day for the Boudreau family, and we certainly appreciate it. And I'll be more specific a little later on in my talk. In October 1948, H.S. Salzinger of the Sporting News wrote, he discounted his lack of speed by getting an uncanny jump on the ball, playing hitters with rare judgment and instinct. He had small hands, but there was not a surer pair in any league. An impossible stance at the plate, but he won the American League batting championship. As a competitor, he had few equals, none superior. That was the ball player, Lou Boudreau. He went to Thornton High School in Harvey, Illinois, and at the time they had no baseball team. He became a very good basketball player instead, an excellent passer and playmaker. He led his high school team to the state championship. He entered the University of Illinois in 1936, where he captained both the basketball and baseball teams. He led Illinois to the Big Ten basketball title in 1937 and was an All-American in 1938. The Cubs and the Indians both pursued him. He also considered becoming an actor. This could have been an Oscar. He was also offered a chance to play basketball for $150 a game with Caesars All-Americans, a Hammond, Indiana team in the National Basketball League, a forerunner of the NBA. But he owed his loyalty to a Cleveland Indian scout named Cy Slapnicka, who had done his best to help him maintain his amateur status at Illinois while negotiating a pro con. You're very good, Tom. Thank God I only give one speech a lifetime. It was a good decision. He played shortstop for your Indians from 1939 to 1950. In 1942, I know I'm telling you all this again, but some of you are as old as me and probably forgot it, but in 1942, at the tender age of 24, he became player manager. 6 years later, in 1948, he would lead the club to the World Series championship. In that glorious season, he also led by example, hitting .355 with 106 runs batted in. He remains today the only manager to win a World Series and win the Most Valuable Player award in the same season. His string of 9 consecutive years as the Indians manager still stands today. As manager, he showed that he was a brilliant strategist. Over 60 years ago, on July 14, 1946, he devised and implemented the Boudreau shift. Some of us in the family also called the moving of the Tomey statue into the park and the Boudreau statue out here as the Boudreau shift. He did it against Ted Williams. Ted was such a pull hitter that Dad put 3 infielders on the right side of second base. Williams continued to try to hit through it, but he would acknowledge later in life that it really affected him. Lou Boudreau still has a mark on the game today, as this defensive strategy is now commonplace. I'll tell you more about the man behind the statue, but first, our family would like to thank the people who made this all possible. The Dolans, Larry, unfortunately isn't here today, but Larry Semper Fi, Paul, thank you so much, Paul, Brother Matt, Chris Antonetti, President of Baseball Operations, Bob DiBiasio, Senior Vice President of Public Affairs, Joan Barno, our Cleveland Indian representative, and our reunion security guard, wherever you are, Joan. Also, I want to acknowledge a great talent. Very difficult because I know that my dad spent 30 years behind the microphone, and that's special kudos to Tom Hamilton. Tom is in his 28th season as the voice of the Cleveland Indians. And of course, easy, Dad. And of course, his peers, manager Terry Francona, and the active Cleveland Indians players. Thank you, guys. But most importantly, besides Tom taking these pages from me, without the support of the Cleveland Indian fans, the great city of Cleveland, this would not be possible. And the Boudreaus thank you from the bottom of our heart. Like Denny, my dad was the greatest man I ever knew. A husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. He excelled in those roles as much as he did at shortstop, and we've been told he was one of the best ever to play the game. I never saw him turn down a fan for an autograph. I don't think he ever finished a meal at a restaurant. Fans would line up for an autograph, ensuring him of a cold dinner, but he never complained. Not yet, Tom. Dad could turn rainouts into sunny days, and baseball was not the only ball that filled our home when we were kids. There were also bowling balls and meatballs. Both were equally important. Dad loved to eat. Mom would make most of her dishes from scratch, including the best cheesecake in both leagues. She had a secret ingredient. You'll have to get that from my sister Barbara or Sharon if you want to know what it is, but you won't believe it. He was an avid bowler and would bowl between road trips and all the time in the off season. He was on 2 South Chicago bowling teams and carried an average of 210. In Frankfort, Illinois, where he was laid to rest in 2001, somebody placed a bowling ball next to his headstone, and it remains there today. His best friends were average guys. Though exceptional on the field, he was a regular guy off of it. Let me quote Bob Feller again. Boudreau was one of the most talented players in baseball, in addition to being one of the classiest human beings you'd ever want to meet. Even before he was manager, as a 21-year-old shortstop, he was our on-field leader. Boudreau drew people to him. When out on the road, he would come to my Little League games and make sure he didn't cause a commotion from autograph seekers. He'd drive up behind the right field cyclone fence and flash his lights so I knew he was there. A Cleveland sports writer mentioned in an article in the early 40s that Lou Boudreau was a good kid. That stuck, and later in life, good kid became an endearing phrase that he used all the time. We all knew that when he called us good kid, it was a gesture of love. Dad also confided in me once that it was also easier saying good kid than remembering somebody's name. No one gets this kind of honor without standing on someone else's shoulders. Many of those shoulders are here in likeness around this ballpark today, including Bob Feller and Larry Doby. One set of shoulders not represented here today, but to the Boudreau family certainly deserves recognition. My mom, Dad's wife of 63 years, his biggest fan, Della Boudreau. An innovative baseball manager, one of the top 10 shortstops ever to play the game. He was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame on July 27th, 1970. Bowie Kuhn, the commissioner of baseball then, introduced him by saying, "There are hitters in the Hall of Fame with higher batting averages, but I do not believe there is a baseball man who brought more use of intellect and avocation of mind to the game than Lou Boudreau did." He's in 3 other Hall of Fames. Of course, Cleveland's, the University of Illinois, WGN Radio and TV in Chicago, where he spent 30 years as an announcer for a team that's going to go unmentioned. His number 5 retired both here within the Cleveland organization and the University of Illinois. This year, he would have been 100 years old. This statue, besides bringing back some fond memories, will keep him forever young. All of us and those family members that are not here tonight extend our sincere gratitude for this great honor. We wish the Indians nothing but success. We hope this year they'll bring the city of Cleveland another world championship. If that happens, I promise we'll all come back to Cleveland and we'll celebrate with you good kids. Thank you. God bless each and every one of you.
That was tremendous. Great job. Well, thank you, Lou. It is truly an honor to have you and the entire family with us today. And now it's time to unveil the statue. And as we get the Boudreau family in position to do the honors, we ask you to please welcome the artist who created the Lou Boudreau statue, the same man who did both Larry Doby's statue and Jim Thome's statue, Cleveland's own David Deming. David? So if you're all ready to do this together, and do you want to do a countdown? We will start appropriately at Lou's retired number 5. So you ready? 5, 4,
3, 2, 1.
Congratulations to the entire Lou Boudreau family. Again, thanks everybody that came, all of the fans here, and how about another win tonight, okay, folks?